Još nije došao, valjda. Kako sam skontao.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. So I'm seeing it seems quite a few are here. This is good. I'm checking the list. Jelena, Aleksandra Prunic, Aleksandra Mičić, Matea, Nina, Ivan. That's everybody right now, and perhaps some others will join us. So really, again, the purpose of this session is pretty similar to the last session, except now we're further along in the semester. So there have been a few additional assignments that have been issued in that time, but not a lot of new material. I mean, mostly the focus towards the end of the semester has been to practice, and I mentioned this last time, the elements that students have found most or had the most difficulty with in the past. So really the focus has just been on practicing and practicing. And that's what we would be doing if we were to actually have classes. That's why we have that 2 hour and 15-minute or 2.5 hour time block, so that we really not just see these elements once, but practice them multiple times. So that's been the focus of the homework. So things like summary writing and paraphrasing and quoting correctly and citing correctly has been the focus for the last few weeks. So if you have questions about that, we can talk about those elements. If you have questions about elements that have come up previously, we can also discuss or any questions or issues you have regarding those elements. Before we get started, there is one thing I did want to mention. I talked with Professor Tanya Gluschatz yesterday, who indicated that some students had, I guess, expressed an element of surprise about the requirements of the course. So I wanted simply to confirm, first of all, that nothing has changed in terms of what you're expected to complete and hand in by the time you take the exam. So remember, that is 4 papers. So that was those were the criteria set at the beginning of the semester, and there are no changes to those criteria. There have just been some changes to the points in the sense that you've at this point earned, if you've done the assignments, you've earned points towards your English research paper. And I believe Tanya has also attributed points to certain activities, and so you've earned those. So those elements are not graded. If you did those elements, you've earned those points, right? So if you've done all, I think it's 5 points at this point, and if you've done those assignments, you have 100% of that grade. And then the points that are left will be graded when your research paper is turned in. So remember as well that we don't have a due date set for your papers to be turned in. It's simply whenever you take the exam. So in academic writing, more or less, you don't know really, if we hadn't put a few points towards these activities, you would have 0 points out of your 100 points potential to be earned until the date of exam. Then the exam is 48 points, and then the papers are 14, 14, 12, 12, which makes 52. So just to confirm that we are still on that track, whenever you do decide to take the exam, the first opportunity will be in June and July, or the June-July exam period. You are expected to hand in, well, you don't have to hand in 4 papers, that's up to you. But I certainly recommend handing in 4 papers to increase your chances of passing. And then on that day, you'll also take the exam, and we will grade all of those more or less simultaneously. So in that respect, nothing has changed. And I want to confirm that in case there were any questions. So that's mostly what I wanted to say. And I would like to open up the floor for questions. So I've got the book here in front of me and some of the materials we've been using. Are there particular questions that anyone would like to offer? so that we can.
Hello.
Yes. Hello, Elon.
Hello. I have a question about research topics
Okay.
because I think about now it's time to start that, like really get into it. So,
Right.
like, what are good research topics?
Okay.
Like, do they have to be contemporary, like reviews? Or,
I
for
will say
example,
this. Go ahead.
Mhm. I was thinking about the affair of like Marilyn Monroe. It was really famous in America, and like the killing of is she killed? Was she killed, or did she really commit suicide? And
Right.
I know there are no books written about it, but like there are a lot of articles and like sources that are, I guess, legit. So you
Right.
can is
So
that an okay
so this
topic?
is what I would
I'm just
say.
asking.
Like, generally, yes. I mean, according to the definition, the research papers should also be analyzing a contemporary topic. However,
Hmm.
what I would say is this, and um, this is in a way similar to writing a literary analysis paper on the review side, um, and that you can evaluate things that happened in the past with a contemporary perspective. So, for example, um, you brought up Marilyn Monroe. If there is something from the past that still is not has like does not have a clear resolution, and that people are
Hmm.
still arguing about now, then there's still a contemporary argument about that. So, and this happens like if there's something from the past and let's say new information comes to light, right? Or maybe new articles have been written, new evidence pops up, then they remain contemporary topics. So history can always be reviewed, and why I mentioned the literary analysis element when it comes to reviews is that and I mentioned this earlier. If you're doing a review um, on like let's say Romeo and Juliet, you can't write the traditional review of is this successful or not. Clearly, 500 years have shown this is successful, but you can take a classical book and write a thematic analysis of it and say, for example, that I think this is the example I used earlier in the semester. Like, you can say that Romeo and Juliet is a comedy, not a tragedy, and that's a fairly novel argument. And then you can write that kind of paper. So in the same way that we can revisit classical works of literature, if we're writing that particular kind of literary paper, we can also do that with history. Like, if you can say that there might be, whether it's something from World War II or World War I, and new information has come to light, or people are still arguing about those things now,
Hmm.
and historians are doing that. That's why there are historians. Is like they're still arguing about why did World War II start? Um, who started the Balkan Wars? Who's responsible for this? And you can write absolutely about that because it's a contemporary argument, even if the topic was in the past.
Hmm. Okay, thank you. I
Yep.
understand.
So hopefully that's clear. Yeah.
Okay.
But like you said, you want to make sure those sources are legitimate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because
I
there's a
will.
lot, when it comes to Marilyn Monroe and topics like that, there's a lot of tabloid material.
Yeah, that I wouldn't use those, of course. Like,
Yeah.
but
You
yeah, I
just have to be
understand.
careful. And there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
on the internet, which, as we've mentioned before, is both a wealth of information and even greater wealth of misinformation. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, good.
Maybe I will find the BuzzFeed test or something.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
part of the test is, I mean, I would generally say that students should use some common sense and and use their own BuzzFeed test to some extent by
Mm-hmm.
asking. I mean, there are questions in the book which
Mm-hmm.
says, you should think about it this way, and that's useful advice. So finding, are there other sources? Are there links that allow you to confirm some of this evidence? So it's not just some person writing with a particular agenda or without um, logic or evidence behind their argument, because then there will be no logic or evidence behind yours either, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So, yeah,
clear. Thank you.
good. Yep. So Elon has spoken. That gets us started. Other questions or comments from the gallery, as we say? I see a few others have joined us. We now have 10 participants. So Sara is here, Katarina is here. If you're uncomfortable speaking or sharing your camera, you can also simply type questions in, as many students did last time.
Can I maybe ask a question related to
You can
business
not
English?
maybe, you can of course ask a question. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to ask about this last task journal assignment related to trade policy.
Okay.
Okay, so do we need to send that by Monday or by May 31st?
You can send that by May 31st because we already have the colloquium upcoming. Then the due date for that, I know generally we've been posting them by a certain date. Regarding that particular assignment, given that the colloquium is coming in just a few days, today, very likely after we finish with this session, I will record a video with some commentary related to the international trade elements so that more or less you'll have my commentary and some of the answers to some of the questions about those elements several days in advance of the colloquium. So I think it would be great if students did get it done by Monday, but I understand that many of you will be studying for the colloquium and other things. So my commentary will be posted today before the end of the day. I promise that. And when you get in your task journal, great if you can, but it is not due on Monday. It is due on the date I posted. And that is, and why I chose that date of May 31st is I was waiting on the faculty to send me a schedule of upcoming events. And once we were informed that the April exam period will begin on June 1st, then I think it's best for students to complete their pre-exam obligations, even though that's the April exam period and not the June exam period. I think that if you get everything in by May 31st, then you can focus your attention on the exam period. So I know that many of you have submitted task journals either in the comments section or to me via email by this point. But just to confirm once again, both the latest international trade assignment and the other group of assignments, including your presentation, should all be submitted to me in email form by May 31st.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. One other thing I'll mention while I wait to see if there are other questions is I mentioned that the last time we spoke, which was several weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember the exact date, but I mentioned in that discussion because I see Nina is on the call and she had asked about doing presentations. So I've posted this, but just to reaffirm the posting, there is a Zoom session scheduled for May 25th. For those of you willing or wanting to present your presentations, I know Nina had mentioned last time that she wanted to present. I have now offered the bait, so to speak, or the encouragement or the reward for courage of a certain amount of extra points for those willing to present. So I hope that some students will join Nina in presenting on that date. Or if you're not going to present, please at least show up. There's benefit. And in the meantime, as was also requested on that date, and then which I forgot to do in the days following, there was a request for a good example of a presentation from past years. So I hope everyone's had a chance to see that. I posted that in the last few days. So if you use that as a model, for the most part, you will succeed.
I just have a request, if that's possible.
Yes. Okay.
I'm not available on 25th when those presentations will be held, but can you record them or something so you can post them somewhere for us unavailable to see?
Yes. I mean, what I've been doing so far is, like, this is recording right now. And I've had a student or two request that this session be posted and that the last session also be posted, the last question and answer session. So more or less there's an option when I create the Zoom meeting to either record it or to not record it. So the last one was recorded and this one is also being recorded. And then it's simply for me to find the best place to post it. So I will do that. It may just be YouTube again, and then I post the link to the YouTube video once it's uploaded so that students can, you know, see the questions and answers from last time, the questions that we're discussing today, and the presentation session that will be held on the 25th can also be recorded and posted. Yep.
Okay, that's great. That's really good. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see, I see a comment on the chat just a moment, let me bring that up. So we didn't get all, Matea has written, we didn't get all the answers to the additional exercises. Last that I remember is we got answers was in a lesson about packaging. So, like I said, I am posting a video today to cover answers about related to Business English 1 as far as the international trade policy. Last week, yes, there was also material related to basically market position. So in the video today, those are the two elements I believe that have not been commented on yet. So when it comes to all the answers of the additional exercises, those would be the answers to the market position activity from the week before and this week's international trade theme. So I will post the answers in my comments about both of those today, so that I believe those are that cover anything that's missing right now. If there's something that I'm missing, or Matea, if you believe there's something else that I have not covered in addition to those two elements.
No. I just have one question about the topic. Two research papers that we have to submit.
Yes.
Are those two different topics or totally different topics?
So generally, yes.
I have to submit to you and to Professor Daniel.
Yeah, this is an important question. Yeah, so let me clarify this. I mean, I mentioned this at the beginning of the semester, but that was a long time ago, and it's been a crazy semester and a lot of information in between. So yes, the papers that are submitted have to be different than one another. If students submit the same paper in English and Serbian, you will not get credit for both of them. Since this is not a translation class, I mean, translation is extremely important. And there are classes that focus on that. Academic writing is not supposed to be one of those. So generally, when the exam is held, I've told you this before, but I often make 2 stacks of papers, or more, actually 3 stacks of papers. One of those stacks is the Serbian papers, and those go to Tanya. And then the English papers stay with me. And then I make a third stack, which is like automatic zeros, which is, not a good stack to be in. And those are usually plagiarism, like basically like really obvious plagiaristic errors. The other way your paper can be moved out of those stacks is, although my Serbian is not excellent, I generally know enough to recognize whether the papers are the same. And then if they are the same,
translated. Okay.
then they're simply removed from the pile. So yes, there are 2 research papers, one in Serbian and one in English, and they have to be different papers.
Okay.
And the same is also true for reviews. You have to have a review in Serbian and a review in English, and they cannot be the same. So, I mean, I know I mentioned we originally scheduled this more as like an academic writing question session, but of course, as we see, we can also ask business English questions. So, one, I can comment momentarily, at least, on the business English element. I've created the colloquium now, and Professor Živković has approved it. So it'll be posted at the time that we've scheduled. I would simply recommend reviewing the papers and notes, potentially your own assignments, from pretty much everything we've covered. So my idea behind designing one colloquium that is larger than the 2 colloquiums would be is that I've tried to prioritize elements, and I've taken quite a few tasks out from the 2 previous colloquiums that I would use. And what I attempted to do in the colloquium is try to pick one task from every week of material, pretty much, so that there's fairly equal representation of every item we've covered. So if you review over the next few days every element that we've covered, then you should be in good shape. Remember as well that you're going to have 3 hours to complete the colloquium, and you will be able to reference the primary book and all those materials and notes that I've mentioned. So you should have them ready. But I think looking at them in advance will help prepare you so you can accomplish everything efficiently.
Is there only vocabulary and that's it, or?
No, there's a lot. There is a lot more than vocabulary.
Okay.
Yeah, there will be one section.
What is the other part?
There will be one section that, and I mentioned this I think in the last session, but I'll repeat it. Professor Živković always gives me a set of terms to be translated, and that's translation vocabulary. That's basically direct translation and no other job in that section. Then there are, of the other like 10 or 11 tasks on the exam, some of them are vocabulary related and some of them are not vocabulary related at all. I would say more of the tasks force you to demonstrate your knowledge and comprehension of something more than they force you to demonstrate your knowledge of vocabulary. So they're pretty much short answer tasks. Yeah, for example, I mean, they're going to be mostly questions that make you write something that proves that you know it.
Like a definition or something.
Yeah, I mean, but it's very rarely, like, I'll use, I mean, I'm not going to give you a super clear example because I don't want to give the colloquium away, but I would say that if you think about 3 types of activities that generally happen on tests, one is simply knowing the word, you know, like or being able to translate it from Serbian to English or English to Serbian. So that's what I would call the most simple task. A more complicated task is providing a definition for a word. And that is present on the test, but to a minimal level. The third is using the information or word in a context that shows you know the definition. So
something like last year.
I mean, I would generally say that the elements are fairly similar to Say 3, but there will not be, like in Say 3, we had a vocabulary section where I would say choose one of these 3 words and use it in appropriate context. There is not going to be a section like that on this exam. Instead, you know, it's going to be some task that, whether it's a CV or an interview or an inquiry or a sales flyer, that allows you to present your knowledge in an appropriate way.
To use it in one sentence or in more than one?
Most of the tasks,
context.
Yeah, so some of the tasks will require you to write entire paragraphs, and some of the tasks will require you to write just a word, and some will require a few sentences. I would say that most of the tasks will require several full sentences to answer.
How many?
So it takes a while. I will just say, I mean, generally, when we do these colloquiums in a normal semester, I give students an hour and a half for each colloquium. And each of those colloquiums is generally 8 to 10 tasks long. And students rarely have trouble finishing the colloquium. And if they do, then I usually give them an extra few minutes.
I have one question about business English.
Yep.
So the words you said, we will have to give definitions. So like when we were doing our homeworks for Professor Živković, we used internet as a source of explanation. So do we have to write the definition of the words in our own words?
Yes.
Or can we use the definitions
also, let me say
before?
this first of all. I have not looked at a single homework you've done for Professor Živković.
Okay, so if we have the same word like we had with him for his homework, we can use our homework basically. That would not be cheating to just.
No, like I said, this is what we call in America an open book exam. You know, so
okay.
Your homeworks can be used, your task journals can be used, your notes can be used, the book can be used. So that will, like I mentioned before, I hope that offsets to some degree the lack of opportunity, unfortunately, that we've had in person to discuss all of these elements. Normally, the colloquium would not take place like that. We'd be sitting in a room. I'd say put everything away and use what's up here. So this time you get to use what's up here plus some other stuff. But I will say this, like in the past, when it comes to translation terminology, because that's the only section that Professor Živković puts on the colloquium, he will send me a list of definitions that he wants to see. So when I grade those definitions, I grade them according to his standard. You know, so if there's a term and it says provide this term in Serbian, or if it's a Serbian term and provide this answer in English, then he'll provide me with the answers he wants to see. So when it comes to the task that will be from him, you will not have to write out a definition. You will simply have to know how to translate a term. And when it comes to providing definitions, I believe from the material that I'll be putting on, that there's only one section that will require you to write a definition of anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So when we have to write a paragraph, how many sentences we have to use?
Yeah, Sometimes there will be exact directions of how many sentences to use. And where it's not, then what I would say is it's up to you to feel like you've completed the task.
So that wasn't very clear even in our business task journals. So when you say write in few paragraphs or something, I never know how many sentences.
Right.
I have.
Right. I mean, basically, I've never had students in the past raise an issue about the length of paragraphs. So I've never made it exactly specific how long I expect those paragraphs to use, or to be rather. And I would generally say that, you know, there is.
But that is a wide term, so.
Yeah, I mean, it is a wide term. I agree.
If it's up to us, we can write in 2 sentences or maybe 1 page. So
I will say this: 2 sentences is not a paragraph. 2 sentences is a pair of sentences.
And 1 page is too much. So
I didn't say it was too much. I will say this: you should write as much as it makes you feel like you've completed the assignment. And if that takes a page, you're probably going to do a really good job, you know? So if your paragraph, if I say like write 4 paragraphs and you've written 4 pages, you're probably going to cover everything. And you're probably going to get all the points you could possibly earn on that assignment. And if you took a different approach and wrote 2 sentences for each paragraph, you're probably going to get very little credit, because it's going to be.
What is the minimum of sentences?
There is no, well, I'm not going to, so yeah, I mean, I would say that a paragraph minimum is probably, okay, I'll give you 5 sentences as a minimum.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my, so like I said, there are some, like I know one task where I've written in the exact directions, like write 2 sentences each for something, right? So that it's very specific. And others, there are going to be tasks which are more open. And in a way, it's up, you know, based on what we've talked about and the material you've read, that I would expect students to use some common sense. And if you use common sense and you make a good effort, then you're probably going to succeed. So there are elements where it is open-ended, and that's not unintentional. You know, I want students to try to complete the task to the level at which they feel like they've earned 100%. And if you do that, you're probably going to earn 100% if you know, the material. And even if you don't know the material, then you have your resources, because it's an open book test, that you can hopefully find and use. And I think what I was starting to say a few minutes ago is that when it comes to time frame, I think 3 hours is a fair amount of time for the completion of the colloquium. Like I started to say, in the past, if we were to do these, if we were going to have 2 colloquiums, which was the original plan, and what I've done every other semester, each one of those colloquiums is an hour and a half, and I would say there's about 10 tasks each. And students generally have been able to complete that and at least some of them get full credit or near full credit on the colloquium or for their grade within that hour and a half time frame. This will not be 20 tasks. It's not, I just put both colloquiums and stapled them together. So what I've done is reduced the amount of tasks. So instead of there being 20 that you have to do in 3 hours, it's going to be more like 12. I think it's 12 tasks. And you'll have 3 hours to complete those 12 tasks. So instead of 2 times 4 pages, it's really 3 pages of material that you should complete in a 3-hour period. So if you do 1 page an hour, you'll be fine. And like I said, and they'll be posted in Word format, so you should simply type in your answers and then save it and send it back to me within the 3-hour time frame. Yeah, so other questions about business English or academic writing?
I wanted to ask you about the review papers.
Okay.
Because I have trouble finding the topic. I wanted to write about the movie Parasite. I asked you already about it.
Right.
But I have trouble with finding any literature or any review topic that I would consider.
Okay. Well, keep in mind. I mean, I'm cutting you off. I'm sorry if there was another part of the question. Okay. You do not need to find any literature for your review. It is only dependent on you having watched, for example, The Parasite. I don't want anyone else's opinion, and I don't want you to refer to other people in your review. I prefer reviews that are only you. I will say that, unfortunately, the recent months, in our experience over the recent months, and very likely the upcoming months, have restricted the amount of elements we could review because festivals have been canceled, concerts have been canceled, the theater has been closed, galleries have been closed, museums are closed. So many cultural phenomena that we could have reviewed, we have not been able to experience, So I think that in a way, the way that this semester has panned out is kind of forced us to review a more limited number of elements like TV shows, movies, and books, because so many of the other cultural manifestations, and we talked about how many different cultural manifestations there are, many of them have been non-existent for the last 2 months and are not likely to occur in the next several months. So, but what I also like to hope is that given that we were forced to stay at home a lot, many of you have found some material that you've watched or experienced or read that you can review. And unfortunately, our options are a little bit more limited because of the lack of other cultural manifestations this semester. But whether it's a movie like Parasite or a TV show or a miniseries or a book, I want you to review it, and you don't have to be, and I don't want you to be dependent upon any other literature out there. Like, what you do need to know is, like I mentioned this before, if it's a movie or a TV show, you should know, like in the introductory paragraph, there should be some information about when it was presented or released, and some of the defining information of what kind of movie it is or what kind of series it is. So that belongs in the introduction and really nowhere else. And that's just what I would call identifying information. So that's really the place where the plot belongs as well. So like I need to have some grounding, whether it's a book or a movie, and that grounding should be in the introduction. Like, this movie was released this way, it was, it falls into this genre, and it follows the story of blah, 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 doing blah, blah, blah. And that's really all I need as far as grounding, and then you can proceed to your analysis, regardless of what it is. And that would also be true if it were a manifestation. Like, if it were a festival that you'd gone to, before you could review it, I would also need to know, okay, when did the festival take place? Where did it take place? And what is it a festival of? And then you could go into your criticism. So in that sense, the procedure is always the same. I need some grounding, some identifying information, and then it's your analysis of whatever the material is. So what I generally like to say is, if you're reviewing a movie, the only material you need is the movie. You may just have to watch it 10 times. to get all that material, or to feel comfortable with that material. If it's a TV show, same thing. You may have to rewatch certain parts of it, but that's the only thing you need. And if it's a book, you only need to have read it and maybe have reread it, or at least go back into sections that you want to use. So you only need the material. Like in the research paper, the evidence is coming from expert opinion and citations and sources, but in the review, it's kind of the exact opposite. You can use sources, but I'd rather you don't, unless you feel like you have to. Like I would, like, if you're going to, since you mentioned the Parasite, well, if I use that as the example, I don't actually want you to read other reviews of Parasite. None. Because I don't want that to get into your criticism. In a way, it could contaminate your criticism and make it more likely to be plagiarized. It should simply be your analysis of a movie or a TV series or a book or whatever it is, based on your having watched it and what you know.
Okay. But for example, if it is about the movie, do I have to cover every aspect of it in terms of like production or technical things?
No, you basically, because I mean, I think when it comes to reviewing a film, there's the good side and the bad side of the same thing, which is there's a ton of different elements, or many, many different elements that you could choose to analyze. So the great thing about that is you have a lot to pick from, and there's a lot of material. The difficult thing about that is there are so many things. What do you pick? You should pick what you believe are the most essential elements to analyze, and you should absolutely not analyze everything, because that would just be a winding paper that would go on a very long time. So, for example, let me bring up, I mean, there are certain movies where you're more likely to analyze one thing versus another. So I'll bring up a movie. I've never seen any of these, but I know that they exist, and that's the series Fast and Furious, right? So I'm not, okay, so now I'm prejudging those films in my ignorance, having not seen them. But I would assume that dialogue or romance is not a key factor in those movies. So you do not, I would not expect someone reviewing Fast and Furious to focus on the intellectual dialogue. But I would probably expect them to focus on the car crashes and special effects. So it's up to you, the reviewer, to choose, which elements are most important for being reviewed, and then choose 2 or 3 or 4 and review them.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm sorry, Professor, but I have to go. I have a class, so
okay.
I'm sorry. I just want to let you know.
Good luck.
So that I'm leave. Thank you. Okay. I will need it. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. Yeah, I hope that commentary is clear. You again, think of it as, I mean, most films, no matter what they are, have a few key categories that I would say are most important to the film, and that's also true for a TV series, and it's also true for a book. It's also true for a festival. And then you choose 3 things that you feel either are really important for that film, or that have shaped your opinion of the film, or that you feel comfortable writing about. So if you don't feel like, if you're watching a film and you don't feel like you're an expert, or you're not comfortable in talking about cinematography, don't talk. Maybe think of another category and choose. I think almost anybody could talk about acting, because we as humans either feel like that, have a natural response towards maybe good acting or bad acting, and so I feel like almost anybody could write about acting based on being a human. Whereas writing about cinematography might be a little bit uncomfortable for some writers, because there are technical elements involved, and maybe you don't feel comfortable writing about those technical elements. So choose a film and choose topics that you might find more approachable. And I think that'll be, it'll allow you to succeed more easily.
Okay.
So I hope I've answered the question, more or less.
You have, thank you.
Okay. And now I can answer other questions. Let's see. Mate, could you send us key answers for additional exercises for academic writing as well? So I will say that I don't believe there's been, so I think the only material that has been issued for academic writing where there has not been direct commentary on, or where answers have not been directly provided, is the material for summary writing. Is that correct, Matea?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, so yes, I can do that. I will. I think some of that, in a way, is one of the reasons that I didn't do that thus far, is because some of it is really just you picking up a dictionary and making sure you're right when it comes to like comprehension or terminology. But there are some additional elements. Like I think, for example, in one of the summary writings, I believe the one about women's participation in the history of science, one of the first tasks is to put an appropriate heading on each paragraph, and that you can not solve just by picking up a dictionary. So I can, for the two summary writing exercises.
Want to check if we get it right. So
yes, exactly. So I will do that. I will. Right. I will either in video form or in let's say digital paper form post the answers to the summary writing exercises. I'm making a note so I don't forget to do that. So summary writing. So what I need to do over the next few days is post material or commentary related to those summary writing exercises as far as academic writing goes. And then when it comes to business English, as I mentioned, I'll be posting commentary about the international trade exercise, as well as the market position exercise. That's my obligation to you by the end of the day when it comes to business English, and then very likely over the weekend when it comes to summary writing.
Just one question.
Mm-hmm.
I have just one question.
Sure.
About our task journals that we have to send by the end of this month.
Right.
We had 2 parts of every task. So we just have to send at the end of this month our task, not to repeat the packaging that you gave to describe, or flyer or
yeah. So basically, if you've already handed in that task, you just hand it in again. What I basically just want to get it all in one to make my grading of those elements easy. So
the additional from the book also as well, we have to send again with our task journals.
Yeah. So what I want to be sent on May 31st is your presentation along with every task journal that's been issued.
Okay.
Yep. So I think it's 10 now. The last one was international trade. I mean, I know we went over more or less in list form last time, but we can do
9.
it again. Is it 9?
9.
Okay. Because I believe we were up to 7 the last time we talked, and then we had the market position one added.
7 packaging, package design, 8 market position, 9 international.
9 international trade. Good. Yeah. So it starts with I can just run through it to make sure that we are all together on that. It goes. First one was CV. Second one was
first one is presentation.
Right. Company. Yes. Of course. So
CV.
Yes, CV.
Cover letter.
Cover letter. Enquiry.
Enquiry. Flyer.
Sales flyer.
Yes.
Commercial.
Yes, commercial communication and package design. Market position, international trade.
Okay. Yeah.
9.
Did we forget anything? That was 8. Oh, but it's 8 plus the presentation, so altogether 9.
Yes.
Yeah. So we talked about transport and we talked about storage, but there was no assignment related to those. But they could be on the colloquium.
Great.
Yeah. So, other questions, academic writing related or business English related. So one thing I will say, while we see if anyone else has a commentary or question, is that there has been some information circulating amongst us teachers or professors about consultations, and I intend to, at least if we cannot have them in person, which is seeming less likely, but may be possible, depending on how the next few weeks go, that if there is no opportunity for consultations in person before the June-July exam period, which I believe is going to begin on the 28th of June, then I will find some way, either through Skype or through Zoom, to hold digital consultations, because while these I believe are helpful, this group session, I know that some of you have very individual concerns about papers that you're planning to submit, and that's something that in the past has been absolutely possible. Much of my consultation time towards the end of the spring semester is often students coming in one by one so we can discuss their approach to a research paper or a review paper. So one way or another, there will at least be at least one session in person or digitally where you'll be able to ask questions individually or one by one. I don't know exactly when and I don't know exactly how, but it will happen. So, and hopefully we'll get that done very soon after the April exam period, so that if there are any changes that you have to make to, let's say, a research paper or a review based on the consultation, you still have time to make those before the June-July exam period. So, are there any additional questions related to academic writing or business English that I can answer?
For business English, what is the last lesson that goes colloquium?
International trade.
7. Is it 7? Okay.
Yeah, so we're done with material, and international trade is the last one. And then the only thing left, I will say this because Ivan had mentioned homework for Professor Živković. When it comes to the final exam and what you will be required to know and in what way you will be required to present it, you'll have to write to him. I generally, when it comes to the business English courses, all 3 of them in the past, I am in charge of the colloquiums and the pre-exam points, and I have nothing to do with the final exam. So that's again the case this semester. I know that there has been, in the past, that has been an oral exam I know that the faculty has sent us messages asking for as many of the exams that were traditionally oral exams to become written exams. So I don't know what format the final exam is going to be in, but and I don't have any impact on that. So the colloquium is in more or less my control, except for the small piece that Professor Kiefler sends to me. And then the final exam is all up to him. So if you have any questions about that exam, that is a question for him. When it comes to academic writing, I make the exam, and I can answer questions about that either now or, you know, in the individual consultations, or maybe in another group session that we can schedule as well. So, any other questions? Well, I suppose if there aren't any additional questions for now, then we'll bring this session to a close. We have our Business English 1 exam on Monday at 10, I believe is the scheduled time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so 10 until 1. Task journals with presentations due all together in one email on May 31st by 5 p.m. And academic writing, hopefully you will continue to work on this. If it's useful and you'd like to have another one of these sessions, I'm more than willing to do this again. So if you want to do that, you can always write something on Facebook or send me an email and we can create another group session. But like I said, I will also make sure to create at least one opportunity for you to get individual feedback if you want to, in some kind of in-person or digital session of consultations. So I'm sorry that we haven't had, you know, a more direct channel of communication, and that consultations have not been much of an option this semester compared to normal, but hopefully there will be at least one, and I'll very likely schedule more than one session of consultations so that, you know, various students will have, so that everybody will hopefully at least one opportunity who wants to have one to speak about their, you know, individual assignments, and those who feel like they need more than one consultation session will also have that opportunity. So the last reminder is simply for the presentations. As I indicated, it is helpful to write in advance if you do intend to present on the 25th. That gives us all an idea of how long our Zoom session will last and allows me to plan my life a little bit, as well as, I guess, other people planning their lives. So I generally anticipate presentations going around 20 minutes, but I've had them be as short as 10 minutes and as long as an hour and a half. I will cut you off if it's going to go an hour and a half. I've learned my lesson. But half an hour is perfectly okay, and I allow you that without any problem. So good luck in your continued efforts. Stay safe, and then I'll be posting material for the colloquium on Monday, and we'll see about consultations for academic writing. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.